is your final as they are headed to the Sweet 16 for the second consecutive season as they put the Cinderella story of sorts of Grand Canyon to sleep. This is a team that didn't elevate to Division I basketball until 2013, hadn't seen a tournament win until Friday. Their journey comes to a close, but 30 wins on the year, something to hang your hat on. The Tide, not hanging them up just yet. They will move on to play North Carolina in the round of 16. Chip Patterson back in the mix with his thoughts. And Chip, this was the high-flying, unhinged, end-to-end sort of game that makes us love this tournament and this time of year. But I want to talk to you specifically about those last 6 minutes. A 17-3 run to close, 10-0 if you want to dial it even further towards the end of the game here. Where did you see Alabama change? Where did you see them flip that switch, per se, in order to really take things over down the stretch?
Yeah, I think the final stages really showcased Alabama's depth. And that's not necessarily something that has always jumped off the screen to me when I'm breaking down the Crimson Tide. I mean, sure, Mark Sears, one of the best point guards in the country, is always going to draw your attention. But they were in a position where they were really getting tested. You know, Wrightsell goes out with the head injury. They get to the point where Stevenson fouls out. Other players are in foul trouble, and you have to continue to work your way down that bench. And Nate Oates had confidence in players like Diabate and the rest of those contributors who came in and made those key plays, because I don't think Grand Canyon is going to have the kind of talent down the bench that Alabama does. It's the fact that they were ready when their number was called really speaks to a team that I think we have probably sold a little bit short because of their own flaws. And look, they still are a flawed team, but very talented, all bought in on making sure that they matched the level of competitiveness that Grand Canyon brought, because the Lopes had the building behind them, the Lopes had the momentum, and Alabama said no. So I was very impressed by the bench play and the depth on display from Alabama.
You said something interesting just offhandedly. The Game 2 crowd loves an underdog, and what better story to root for here than the Lopes in this one, but that story comes to a close here. Alabama back-to-back seasons in the Sweet 16. When you look upon what they went through a year ago, the stories that surrounded this team, it's a different group now with some of the same identity Nate Oates is trying to, you know, project onto his group. Is there value to be taken from last year, or was that such a individual, interesting undertaking for them to go through that you flush it and this is its own experience?
Brandon Miller took up so much of the conversation.
Certainly.
And he was so good on the floor that all throughout the Alabama's run, that was what defenses were looking at. It's what the media was talking about. And I think that has led to a little bit of an Alabama hangover for the rest of the college basketball world, which is why we're probably overlooking Alabama's chances to come out of the West region. Alabama at its best, and this was not Alabama's best, but Alabama at its best can absolutely hang with North Carolina in the Sweet 16, can absolutely go and outscore an Arizona or a Clemson in the Elite Eight. The key for Alabama is going to make sure that you don't have those kinds of mistakes, the mental mistakes defensively that would allow a team like North Carolina to be able to send you home early from Los Angeles, where all the stars will be out. So there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, the tape here is not going to show a very clean game for the Crimson Tide, but sometimes winning in March requires winning ugly. This was an ugly win because, look, Alabama, they shoot a ton of threes. They like to get looks at the rim. That can be a very aesthetically pleasing style of basketball. Alabama showed me they can win ugly. That's an important thing going into the next round.
Bama was 7 for 7 to end the first half. Outside of that, not the most efficient night, you're going to see out of this team. But staying with that theme of last year's Alabama squad, the last time they met with UNC was last year in that 4-overtime thriller between these two teams. As you project forward and look at them on the same court, maybe more polished, more dialed in is North Carolina, but the route to victory for Alabama doesn't seem unfathomable. Where do you see that route to victory for them?
It's got to be down low, dealing with North Carolina's size, because we all know about Armando Bacot, but you know, in this tournament, especially against Michigan State, when Jalen Withers is coming in there and just making absolutely huge plays, Jalen Washington with a massive dunk coming down the stretch. I mean, they're just bigs on bigs on bigs, and while Alabama does have size, I don't think it's as much girth earth, if you get what I'm going with here. And I think that what North Carolina can do in terms of beating Alabama up on the boards when they've got everything spread out, when they're trying to use that athleticism and versatility, that is going to be something that Alabama's going to have to deal with. I know that Nate Oates knows that he has to deal with that, but that's where I think this game will hinge. Is Alabama going to win some battles on the boards? Because I think that is a big-time edge for the Tar Heels.
What they do have is a guy like Mark Sears, who is doing absolutely unfathomable things on this court. It is really unprecedented in many ways. 50, 15, and 10 through 2 tournament games. Caron Butler and Sears, as he comes off 26 in this game, 30 against Charleston. To have that sort of scoring consistency on a team. Yes, this is a team sport in more ways than one, and we don't often see those 40, 45, 50-point type nights that we do at the elevated level. To have a guy like that you can lean on in a tournament like this, I asked Tim Doyle the same question the other day. If it's team or if it's guy, you want a meld of the two. But can you ride a guy to an eventual Final Four? I mean, that's sort of what they're doing from an offensive standpoint here behind Sears.
Is that guy a guard? Because if so, then yes. And that is where I think Mark Sears does determine what exactly the ceiling is going to be for Alabama, because he's going to be the one who has the ball in his hands for those possessions when you absolutely need a bucket. And yes, he's a volume scorer, but he also does a terrific job of bringing in the defense and setting up one of his teammates for a really good look at a three-pointer, one of those threes that the Crimson Tide love to shoot so much of. And so for Mark Sears, the reason why he fills it up is because sometimes they need him to do that. You're right, we don't see a 50 burger out there, but how about almost 50% of Alabama's points? 26 in a game that's decided in the 60s and 70s. Like, this is a big time percentage of responsibility that falls on Mark Sears' shoulders, and he, though slight in height, is very, very ready to take on all of that responsibility.
I guess I just project my personal worries. As we look at these box scores game by game, there's so many teams that are doing it 10, 12, 14, all across a box score. You see a game here and a performance like this out of Sears, it opens your eyes, but also makes you think what happens on the night when it's not going down. 56 points, 16 rebounds, 11 assists this tournament for Mark Sears. Chip Patterson, we thank you. As always, we take a look at those numbers. Charleston in the round of 64. Grand Canyon here down the stretch. Sears 26, 12, and 6. Again, in total, 56 points, 16 rebounds, 11 assists, and math has never been my strong suit.